So, first of all, I want to be very thankful for all of you to put up with not being here. Um, the very last minute, I really appreciate you guys, and I appreciate Professor Solis coming at the last minute to help. But there is one thing in fashion where it's very similar to Adobe, right? They pride themselves that there's 10 different ways on do the same thing on Photoshop and Illustrator, right? Well, fashion is even worse. There is a million ways of doing it, and they are all acceptable necessarily, yes or no. The better ways. Some of them they're more pricier finishing. Some of them are more mass production, so you have to save money because time is money. So I'm going to show you more ways on putting boning. Okay, I've been watching what you guys have been doing. Yes, they are acceptable. There is nothing wrong with those methods, but there are other ones. And if you guys might even figure out a different way how you want it to be put in, right? So that's going to make your garment and your label, because you know we look at all these labels and you'll gravitate to one or the other. They both fit, right? Why is one make it look one way and one make it look the other way? It's how it's done, how it's finished, right? It's still going to be worn by the same person. So as a little bonus, I'm going to show you how to do. If I have enough fabric, I'll show you how to do two things. How to do the French piping like the bustier that I showed you, because a lot of you guys got really wanting to do that because you saw mine, right? Bustier is over there. So for that, you need to cut a band that it is the finished width of how you wanted it to be, plus the seam allowance twice. So if I wanted to look half an inch, I'm going to do it plus half an inch seam allowance, 1. I multiply it by 2, it would be 2. Now, if you have a heavier fabric, I might even give it an extra eighth or an extra quarter of an inch for the thickness of the fabric first, and also by cutting it on the bias, it tends to stretch. So when it stretches, it gets narrower. Why do we cut it bias? Because these bands go over the breast. I mean, our bodies are not cubes, right? So it would be a cube, maybe you can get away with cutting it on the grain line. But if you want it to be molding and shaping it, then it needs to be on the bias so you'll be able to move it around. Are we all okay? So this measures like 2.5. I'm actually going to stitch in the center of it. Okay, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do a finger pressing. Can you see it? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm going to show you several ways how to do boning, but I'm going to start with the French piping. French piping is an embellishment. French piping does never use boning inside. And boning, as I've been repeating since we started with the bustier, always goes on the lining, never on the self. Okay? So you're going to place this little band right on the edge of the seam allowance, okay, on the single layer, okay? And as it's like, why is this machine so quiet? But anyway, so I'm going to stitch right on the center of the band. And yes, I do use pins for everything I do, okay? And you should too. You should never have this lever down. I mean, it's like at the end of the semester, I have to keep repeating that. Use your knees. The life is much easier. Now, if you want to reverse here or not, that's up to you. It really doesn't matter. I like to reverse just to make sure that it will not be coming off. So you just stitch it edge to edge, raw edge to raw edge. We're creating embellishment, right? So I'm going to do, and I'm having withdrawals. I haven't touched a machine or a pair of scissors in over a week. Now you guys can see that this is on the bias because the ripped fabric, the cross grain, is 45 degrees from the actual edge. I can cut that off. I really don't need it. Okay? And you will get up and go to the iron. I'm not gonna do it now because I want to do this fast. But you will get up from this chair and you're gonna go to the iron and you're gonna press this down. See that? Now I'm gonna put the other layer of fabric to sew it together. And now I stitch it at the 1/2 inch seam allowance as we always do. Actually, not like we always do. As you did on your pattern, right? I hear with you guys, and I don't mind if you ask me that question, but probably you guys will be sick of me giving you the same answer. Okay? How much do I sew it here? And what is the answer that I give you?
What is your pattern?
How much did you put in your pattern? Right? So here I'm gonna stitch at the 1/2 inch. And I'm gonna reverse at the beginning. Here I do want to reverse. It looks complicated, but actually is one of the simplest. So when you press it, you have the band that is perfectly even. See how much cleaner it looks? Yes? All right. So, I wanted to show you ways of doing boning, okay? Now, boning, the way that I've seen that quite a few of you had been taught is what is called cupboard boning. It comes already with its own covering. You're doing it with a Rigiline, but the purpose of the Rigiline is that you actually, if you look at the definition, it's called sew through boning, right? So you literally can sew through it, right? So why do you need to make a casing if you can sew through it? It actually saves you time and it looks cleaner and flatter. I'm going to show you this just to show you what you were shown, right? You cut your boning edge to edge. And you take the boning out. So you have only the casing, okay? When we're going to put the boning on it, that's when we're going to check the correct curve of it, okay? Now, if we're putting it on the lining, the face, the right side of the lining will be actually touching our skin because it's lining, right? So this will be put on the wrong side of the lining. The curve should be towards your body. That way when you put it on, the pressure will sit flat. If you do it the other way, your neckline and the bottom of it is going to be always pushing out. And you don't want that. So first I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut the corners to try to round it out. Okay? And burning it really doesn't do a lot to this one. Okay? And what was the other thing I was gonna say? I want to make sure that I protect the corners. You guys have worn strapless something and it's boning is digging on you, right? You know what that is called? Lawsuit. And as a designer, you don't want to have a lawsuit, right? So what you do is you protect them. What I most of the time do, I'm not going to show you because I need to get up. Maybe I use a little piece of muslin. What I get is a little piece of the batting that you're using in the bust cups, single layer. You cut a tiny little square and you wrap around it. So that way, it is protected. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm gonna use this muslin as a protection, and I'm gonna cut the 2 little squares to protect the end. Now, before I do anything, how far from the edge I should keep this boning?
Depending on your size.
Okay, so my seam allowance is 1/4 inch. So when should I cut my boning? Should I cut only 1/4 inch on each side? No, because you're gonna have all the bulkiness of the fabric. So by rule of thumb, your boning should be always 1/4 inch shorter than your seam allowance. So if I have 1/4 inch seam allowance here, I'm gonna cut the boning at 1/2 inch shorter. If I have 1/2 inch, then I'll cut it at 3/4, right? Now, I'm not gonna go and cut both sides. I know that 1/4 and 1/4, that's half, and both ends is another half, so I'm gonna cut 1 inch away, right? And then I'm gonna round my corners. So here we go with the boning. Does boning have to be on a seam? No, you can put boning anywhere. Your forehead, in your belly button, on your knees. Okay? Why am I saying that? Because, for example, you've seen those dresses that have a very low neckline here, or you have collars that they need to be standing up. So you can actually put one on the edge, so that way your neckline will stand up or your collar will stand wide, right? Now, you don't use boning on everything. So I've seen some students from other classes that graduated that they were putting boning on the skirt. So think about it. Don't you need to sit down? Do you want to sit down over that boning? So there are other things to be used to stiffen the fabric, so you don't need to have boning. But the last thing I would recommend is putting boning on a skirt. You know, they try to do that cage type of thing, right? Please don't. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna fold that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, remember, no boning. I'm gonna get this little piece of muslin and I'm gonna wrap around it. See that there is a little seam allowance right here, the top stitching? I'm gonna stitch exactly on it. I can't stitch any smaller than that because then when I try to put the boning on, it's not gonna fit, right? So 1/2 inch from the edge, and I am not gonna start at the boning. I'm actually gonna start at the edge of the fabric. And because I do that, because I'm gonna finish the neckline on the bottom, I don't need to reverse. Can you see it? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm gonna start on the edge. See, if you wanna trim off a little bit off on the sides, you can do that later on. And I'm gonna stitch this. And please guys, don't try to put pins on the boning on the garment to sew. Doesn't work out. So that's why I decided to cut a bust cup, which is the complicated part, to show you what you need to do for this. Okay, so I'm gonna stitch about maybe 2-3 inches before I get to the end, and I'm gonna stop. Oh, I'm glad it's a different color so you can see the difference. And then I'm gonna stitch the other side. By the way, please do not use that really narrow foot. Okay, anybody knows what that narrow foot is called? Are we putting zipper? So what are you using? Right? You want to use a flat foot because you have more control. The narrow foot, it barely grabs the feet dog underneath. This one, you have a nice grip. Okay? And please guys, don't be lazy about it. Just change it. It's only a screwdriver away, right? I know I was a student one time. I know exactly what it goes through everybody's minds. Okay, we're good? Remember, this is the lining, so I need the curve to be this way. So now I'm going to insert the boning. my boning is going to be really, really nice and tight all the way to the end. See how tight it is to the end? So now I'm going to do the other end. So I'm going to fold this in. If I don't have the 1/2 inch, cut it. Okay? Don't keep going because you measured it before. Now, if you measure boning for the right side, same seam, but on the right side, go ahead and cut the left so they will be both even. Don't cut one at a time. So if you measure the side of the bustier and you're boning, go ahead and measure 2, because the other side is going to be the same length, unless you did an asymmetric garment, obviously, right? So again, I'm going to get a little other piece of muslin and place it underneath, right? And I'm going to stitch from the edge of the bustier and I don't need to reverse here. I'm actually going to stitch about 1 inch, 2 inches, because that overlap, it is like reversing. Now you guys saw how many steps I had to do this, right? You're gonna see how much easier it is with the other boning that I asked you to get. Make sure that you always spread your fabrics so you don't have a wrinkle here, or this seam is wrinkled. Pretty? Okay, so let's do now Rigiline. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing, seam in the middle of nowhere, but with the Rigiline. So this measures edge to edge. Again, 1/4 inch less than the seam allowance. I'm gonna cut it 1 inch shorter. I still would use a little piece of muslin for the tips, but what is the difference here? Instead of having one piece of stiff plastic, you have several of them, and that's why you can stitch around it, okay? I'm gonna become a paramedic, and I'm gonna burn around. I just wanna kill the corners. I don't want to get sued. I don't want anybody to do a Google search and says like, oh, whatever did this, right? I want only praises. I don't want lawsuits. I don't know about you guys, but anyway. Now this is the beauty of this one. Again, I'm gonna wrap it. Again, I'm gonna place it, same curve. I'm gonna place it 1/2 inch from the edge because I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay? And again, I'm gonna stitch from the edge of the neckline. Can you see it? I just wanna make sure.
Yeah.
See that there is a little wide ridge on the edge? This is where my stitching I wanted it to be. That would be my guideline so it's not moving around. So you can stitch on top of it. And then I stitch out. And then I turn it around and I do the other side. Sorry for the technical issues, but we're bowing back. Okay, so we stitch it out. Look at how much easier and faster it was. See how much cleaner it looks? you want this to be perfectly flat, just like that. Okay, let me show you a couple more ways. So let's say that I have a seam allowance here. I am actually going to create a casing with a seam allowance. I mean, this that I did, it could be right on top of the seam allowance. Is the top stitchings are not going to be perfect with the seam allowance lining up? That's okay. It's on the lining. Nobody sees it. Okay? So I wouldn't be too concerned on that. I would be more concerned that it looks perfectly flat. Okay, so let's do another way. Again, 1/4 inch less than the seam allowance. We'll do a little burning. Neighbor's gonna call police and say that you are running a meth lab, right? Okay, so one way of doing it, remember, I wanna make sure that my curve does this way. It could be that we just place it on the seam allowance. This one actually you will not even see any stitching. I'm gonna place it right here on the seam allowance only, and I'm gonna stitch it on the seam allowance only, making sure that it is right against the previous seam. See that? And this time, I'm gonna stitch it only on the center. I do not recommend this when you have very long boning. I recommend this to be done more when you have shorter pieces. So in other words, do not use it if your bustier is down to your hips, but up to your waist, you should be okay. Okay? So basically, that's all I did. You don't see anything on the outside. Yes? So when you're going to close, what happened here? I grabbed something I wasn't supposed to. And, well, I'm just gonna cut it. I don't want to waste time taking it apart or anything. Just make sure that whatever's underneath is not on the way. So when you're actually going to sew the bottom and the neckline, that you're forcing your seam allowance to remain open, is gonna force the boning to stay there. Right? And then you don't have to deal with the issue of, I don't wanna see the boning, because sometimes each design is different. You might decide something different for each one of them. Some of them you would like to have a boning exposed, right? And just because you learn how to have the boning exposed doesn't mean that that's the only way to have the boning. That's it. So when I hold it in place, right? There is nothing showing, but when you finish it, the boning is laying correctly. Are we all okay? It will flip and remain the same way. Just make sure that you're working on the wrong side. This is a seam allowance. That the boning is placed properly, so it doesn't flip like I just did. I did it backwards. Okay? I own my mistakes. Okay, so next, let's do another seam so I can show you the second to last way. So you can use your seam allowance as the casing to place the boning on. What's going on in here? This machine doesn't like me today. Don't worry, sometimes I don't like myself. No, actually that's not true. I always like myself. Okay, so here we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little edge stitch. And there's your seam allowance, right? So you get your boning, 1 inch, a quarter of an inch less than the seam allowance. You burn the corners. You guys can see how I'm rushing, because time is money.
Don't burn yourself, please.
Huh?
Don't burn yourself.
No. Have another thing, 9 fingers. Wouldn't be the first or the last time. Come on. Work with me here. See, I created a casing out of the seam allowance. By the way, I told you guys to buy this 1/2 inch, but the actual 1/2 inch boning I think is 12 millimeters, and 20.5 millimeters is actually 1/2 inch. So it's a tiny bit less. So that's why I can afford to stitch on the edge and put it in. See, there is the boning, and then when you look at it on the other side, you have a single top stitch, not a double one. I'm gonna leave this, guys, so you can use it as an example. Okay, so everything okay so far? Okay, so what I want to do now is actually show you the hard part of the boning. So the bustier that I draped and I demoed to you, I'm gonna sew only 1 bust cup, so I can put 1 boning. And I'm gonna put it regular way. So I walked this pattern to death, correct? So I know for a fact the beginning and the end are, this walking, it's perfect. I don't have doubts in my head. When you didn't walk it, then you have doubts on your head. So I'm going to pin only the beginning, okay? Oh my God, my pin notches match. Who would have known? Okay, remember these little corners sticking out here? That's what it should be, because we're stitching here and not at the edge of the seam allowance. And now I'm gonna go all the way to the end. And I actually have the same situation at the end, right? We walked everything from the waist down and the waist up, so notches on the waist should match perfectly. And as you can see, besides having the pins perpendicular to the seam, I'm also pinning only exactly where I am sewing. I don't know what happens in China. That's not my issue. My issue is between pin and pin, exactly where the machine is going to run through. Yes? And then here comes the hard part of the cup, because it's rounded. I haven't showed you how to do that. I didn't show you how to press this either, right? I'm gonna show you that now. See, my notches match because I walked them. All of them are matching, right? Not because I'm beautiful and I'm perfect. I'm very far from that. Even though we can contest it, but anyway. You guys need coffee? Okay. I mean, I'm working here really hard and I get no reaction. Okay. So,
You've been working hard too. That's the problem.
okay. Huh? I want to be careful with the order of those two words. Okay. So, I reverse beginning. And notice that you guys can see on the video is edge to edge, exactly on the edge, because when I press it open, I want the seam allowance to be 1/2 inch on each side, not a little bit, a little less, because I'm changing the shape, okay? And I don't take the pins 5 blocks away. I take the pins when they're very close, because I needed to shape that curve. I want to sew on top of it, because a piece might fly out. It might damage my fabric from the bleeding from your eye. So see here, I have a clean seam, and here I have no pinch, just leave it. No pinches whatsoever, see that? Okay, now I need to go press this seam allowance open. Now this is going to be where the boning goes, so that's really not a problem, it will be standing here. I need to have still my seam allowance pressed open, right? If I were to use this on the self, the cup will be like this. Right? Let's have it on the video. See how it ruffles? How am I going to fix that? Anybody? Little triangles, right? Always rule of thumb. Curve up, triangles. Curve in, snips. So look, my waist probably have a curve in. I want to snip it. Don't snip it way too close that it's going to be a hole, right? Here is a curve in. I'm going to snip it. And here I'm going to cut a few, not too many. And by the way, depending on your fabric and how thick it is, you're going to notice that the fabric is going to ask you to do more or less. Yes, they do have a mind on their own. Okay, so should we go to the iron to press? Yeah, anybody can do phone holding?
Benjamin?